Hey there, LAWsome listeners. We just came off of a really fascinating conversation with Michael Mogill, covering the lessons from working with the nation's top law firms. Really hit on some important points in terms of what firms are really struggling with right now in the industry and how they can continue to stay ahead. So tons of solution-oriented discussions here. Matt, what can our listeners expect from this discussion?
Well, I think my biggest takeaway from our conversation with Michael is the more things change, the more they stay the same. And we are in a period of change right now in the legal industry and, you know, legal marketing. And that change can be scary, right? But there are some fundamental principles for marketing your firm and running your firm that haven't changed. And that was my biggest takeaway. We've talked about AI and private equity coming in and all of the changes that, the industry is going through right now. But there's still some fundamentals there that have not changed, and firms would be wise to stick to those. And so that was my biggest takeaway.
No doubt. And just like we've seen with Michael and Crisp over the years, I mean, with change, with tech evolution, comes massive opportunity for law firms. So this is definitely one that you're going to really benefit from. So we hope you enjoy. Let's hop in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another LAWsome episode. I'm your host, Tanner Jones, along with my co-host, Matt Smyers. Today, we're here with a special guest, Michael Mogill. If you're not familiar with Michael, he is the founder and the CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. He's also the author of The Game-Changing Attorney. He also has hosted the Game-Changing Attorney podcast for quite some time, and he's the founder of the Crisp Game Changer Summit. Michael was recently named EY Entrepreneur of the Year, recognizing his impact as an innovator and a leader within the legal profession. Michael has helped thousands of attorneys differentiate themselves from competitors and improve their leadership and their business operations. Under his leadership, Crisp has been recognized as one of the top 100 fastest growing private companies in Atlanta for 9 consecutive years by the Atlanta Business Chronicle, named a top workplace in Atlanta 3 times, and honored on the Inc. 5000 list of the fastest growing private companies in America 7 times, earning spots in the top 10% twice. Michael's approach is to take everything he's learned generating massive growth in his own organization at Crisp and apply those skills to the country's most committed law firm owners. That said, welcome, Michael. It's an honor to have you on the LAWsome podcast.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Michael, you have a rich history, man. We've known each other for a number of years. I'd love to dig into the beginning. Let's take us back all the way to the early days of Crisp. What can you speak to on the evolution of Crisp? Where did you start and where are you today?
Yeah, so in the early days, I started the company in 2012 and it completely bootstrapped the business. I had $500 to my name and I was someone who had bought a video camera. I wanted to just learn, how to, originally just take pictures as a skill or a hobby, and that became a business. With Crisp, originally we were just producing videos and there was no real focus. I mean, it was videos for anyone, whether it was a brand like Coca-Cola or Verizon or a soccer tournament or a bar mitzvah, whatever it was, we were shooting videos. It ultimately what led us to law firms, because we now only work with lawyers and law firms, is the only area in which we focus, is we had a great attorney. She came to us, was struggling to stand out and compete in her market. So she's a wonderful lawyer, but just didn't have the financial resources to invest heavily in traditional advertising like TV, radio, billboards, etc. And we produced a number of videos for her, put them up on social media. Her business started to grow like exponentially. She referred another lawyer to us, and then obviously that led to more and more attorneys. At the time, I didn't know anything about the legal industry, but as I started to learn more and more, I saw what was a very competitive, saturated market where consumers would have a difficult time telling one attorney apart from another, right? They just couldn't tell the difference. So they would see like the large like billboard lawyers or the ones they would see on TV, but they couldn't tell you who was a great lawyer because everybody was a super lawyer, right? So, and then there was so many, it was almost like a David versus Goliath scenario. There's so many great attorneys out there that cared deeply about their clients and their community and really wanted to make a great impact, but just didn't know how to get their name out there. So that's how, the business started. And we started as a video company, then introduced the marketing piece, which was really just placing the videos on social media and now streaming. And then the coaching side of the business that launched in 2018. And that was really around, okay, let's say you stand out and differentiate, and then you get the content out there. Now the phone's starting to ring. Now, how do you solve the root foundational challenges within the business? Everything from how do you handle intake to how do you hire people? How do you lead your team? How do you create a great culture? How do you have systems, processes, all the things that help to scale a law firm? And not just for the firm owner, but for the, really rolling this out to team members as well. So that's been the evolution over several years. Now we've had the privilege of now helping, I believe, 1,107 firms, and it's been a humbling experience. And I do have to say, I give you guys a tremendous amount of credit, because when I was a baby, and when we were at that first, like one of the very first conferences we ever attended was that ABA Lawyeronomics conference, and this was the time I will never forget, man. And I'm so grateful to you guys, because we were an unknown, nobody had ever heard of us. And I say we, it was really just really me at the time, and what we used to do, because it was a big investment to go to a conference, right? Between the flight, the hotel, we didn't have a booth. And because we were a video company then, I was like, we have to have a way to play these videos. We need like a TV. But it was like, I think it was $1,500 or $2,000 to rent a TV. And I was like, well, I can't afford that. So we were in Vegas, and I said, well, why don't we just go to Best Buy and buy a TV, and then we'll set it up at the conference. And then when the conference is over, we'll return the TV. And I know someone's going to listen to this and be like, oh, it's ridiculous. But when you're starting a business with $500 to your name, you have no other options. And I needed some help getting the TV set up, and then we were packing it up, and you guys helped us out, Consult Web. So I'm like grateful, for all the help early on.
I remember that vividly, and it taught me a lot, just about you, your hunger, your willingness to do whatever it took to help more and more law firms. And so I was inspired by that, at an early age in my career, and to see you grow since that time has been it's been a pleasure on this end.
Michael, a lot of our listeners are business owners, right? And I want to talk a little bit about the fear that comes with starting out, running your own business. And like us, you decided to get into an industry that can be intimidating, right? It's a tough crowd. And through all of your stages of growth, and as rapidly as you've grown, and the risks that you've taken, talk to us a little bit about how you overcame the fear of the unknown, being a little bit intimidated by the marketplace, whatever it might be. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's I will say that I've joked sometimes that if I knew then what I know now, I don't know if I would have still done it. So I was very fortunate that I didn't know anything then. And sometimes when you don't know what lies ahead, you're going to pursue it because you don't know all the difficulties and all the obstacles you're going to face, right? Sometimes you're those to us, right? How hard it's going to be. You're going to say no thanks, right? So I think that was a part of it for sure. The other thing for me is I view this as I'm a first generation immigrant. My family and I, we immigrated here to America when I was 4 years old, and we came here. They didn't have any money. They had to start over. I was the first one to learn how to speak English, and first one to read and write English, first one to go to college, all those things. So I always viewed it as a tremendous just opportunity, and really a sacrifice that my parents made for us to be able to have opportunity here in America. So in one respect, my career path was either supposed to be doctor or lawyer, right? Like immigrant parents, like those are the two paths. So, and I actually went to college. I went to school for medicine, for pre-med. I got into medical school. I took the MCAT and everything like that. But just being very entrepreneurial from an early age, I wasn't sure that was for me. So I put in for a deferral, like essentially like a year before medical school would start. And I was trying all sorts of things. I mean, this was in 2008, so the economy tanked, and I was washing dishes at Taco Mac, which is like essentially like a dive bar. And then from there, it led me to the CDC, where I was watching like lab equipment. And then I had an opportunity to do some web work over there, and that led to ultimately buying that camera and starting Crisp. But I just looked at it as, well, what's my other option, right? I mean, goodness, like if this doesn't work out, I might have to get a job somewhere, right? And I wasn't very good at that. So that was one thing. And then the other thing is, I think it realigned so it's probably two things now that I think about it. One is, when I would see somebody succeed, I would, instead of envying them or trying to come up with reasons why like they had advantages that, maybe I didn't have, I always looked at it as, well, someone succeeding, like that shows that it's possible, right? Like if they can do it, then perhaps if I learned the skills that they have and I model the actions and the habits that they have that I could achieve similar results. So just seeing somebody ahead of me, seeing someone who's doing better than me, to me was exciting and empowering because it just meant that it was possible. Like it was possible to do. So I always like admired and respected that. And then the other piece was that my viewpoint towards risk was the other way around. I actually look at it from the standpoint that okay, I can do something and it may not work out. But if I don't exercise courage and if I don't make the attempt, then the probability of success there is zero. So I always view the greater risk as not making the attempt. And then, I think any reason an entrepreneur generally becomes an entrepreneur, whether it's starting a law firm or any type of business, is you're placing a bet on yourself and your own decision making. And even when you have no idea what you're doing, it's that bet that you place on, well, I can learn and I can figure things out and I can adapt. And I would say with all of that, it's also this belief. The last thing I'll say on this, Matt, is if you ever seen the movie Armageddon with Bruce Willis,
Of course.
you gotta love it, right? And there's one thing that you wonder, okay, what are these guys doing? Why do they bring these oil drillers, train them to be astronauts and like bring them to space to like drill, because there's this asteroid on course with Earth and they were trying to like basically drill in the asteroid, throw a nuke in there and blow it up before it hit Earth. And you think, well, why wouldn't they just train the astronauts to drill, like to do what the oil drillers would do? And there's a scene with Bruce Willis when they ask him, they're like, what are you doing up here? And he's like, well, I'm doing this because I don't trust anybody else to do it. So for me, there was an extent where if it wasn't going to work out, I wanted it to be all my fault, right? Like I at least knew that if it didn't work out, it was because of my decisions and my choices, et cetera. And if it did work out, it's because we had a great team. But I was more comfortable having everything be my fault and taking complete ownership over all my outcomes than relying on somebody else.
Love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the heart of an entrepreneur. I appreciate you sharing that, Michael. I'm gonna pivot back a little bit to kind of an angle you were hitting on earlier with respect to, at least what I interpreted is, most lawyers are battling anonymity in their marketplace, knownness essentially, and that's obviously a big area that you've helped, especially early in the crisp years, in terms of producing video and getting it out there. But from our experience, video has been one of those unparalleled elements in marketing where it really helps to couple, movement, action, visual of the human itself, the voice, the tonality, the personality. All of those things, in many instances, go way beyond like objective evaluation, and they really get down to the heart of how someone truly, connects with an individual. So we recognize video as a incredible tool for a law firm. But I'm curious, do you have any guidance with respect to how law firms can make best use of video as opposed to just, continuing to produce it? What do you do after that? How can they get the most mileage out of this content?
Yeah. So it definitely starts with the type of content, and it depends where you're going to use it, right? So there's a lot of times where I think filming content on your phone can work really great, right? Like just candid content you could put up on social media, whether it's on a platform like Instagram or TikTok, where you are humanizing yourself, answering a question, or showing off something you're doing in the community. I think that's really great. There's like really great ways of distribution. There's times also where doing something a bit more like, let's say, professional, if it's going on your website, for example, or it's something where you're trying to attract more discerning clients and higher average case values. You want to demonstrate that you're the expert, right? Like it just really depends on what you're looking to do with video. And I find that the thing that makes video great is either you're thinking, okay, I'm either going to be educating, informing people, or I'm going to be establishing trust and authority and building an emotional connection. Because you can, there's so many lawyers that are in similar practice areas, but why you do what you do matters, right? I spoke to an attorney the other day that was a construction worker, and they got injured. And they did not get great legal representation, so they became a lawyer, and now they focus on representing other people that are like have been in construction accidents, right? And like, who better to serve than someone who themselves was a construction worker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just one example, but conveying that is so important. So then coming back to the distribution of video, to me, marketing is always just the amplification of a message. So if you get the message right, then really what you're doing with marketing is ensuring that it reaches more people, and whether it reaches more people or it reaches more people more frequently. And I look at, okay, well, where do those people spend their time? So depending on who you're trying to reach, that's where I would decide like where, which platform is going to make the most sense. I mean, everybody's on social media, like young and old, like, social media replaced family reunions essentially, right? But at the same time, it's also considering, okay, well, we come across a lot of lawyers that most of their business comes by way of referral and word of mouth. And it's referrals from other lawyers. So sometimes you're marketing to other lawyers as opposed to more so like B2C within your community. And if you're going to market to other lawyers, LinkedIn is a great platform for that, right? So it really depends on who it is you're trying to reach. But the use cases of video, I mean, we recently worked with a firm where they weren't trying to compete against these mass advertisers, but they wanted to be able to reach more of their referral sources. So they had a list of everybody. They knew all of their, like, obviously their names, their mailing addresses, etc. And they sent them video brochures with their videos on it, right? They sent these things out. They sent them a nice mailer, a nice package, and they were able to reach a very specific audience, which were their referral sources, to stay top of mind. So that's another way to do it.
Let's dive back into the messaging and the voice, right? The brand, the identity, however we want to label this. And I'm sure you have these conversations with firms all the time, like we do, Michael. Firms that find themselves kind of stuck in the middle, and when you ask them kind of who they are, what they stand for, they feel like, well, we don't really stand out. We're good lawyers, right? But what makes us any different? They really struggle with finding that thing, right, that they need to get behind and stick to as their identity. What advice would you give for those firms who feel like, hey, we're really no different than anybody else, and are kind of stuck in that middle and find it very difficult to stand out in the marketplace?
Yeah, the first question I like to ask is just, why did you become a lawyer? Right? Like, what was it? Right? And a lot of times it's an experience in their childhood or something. Let's say a parent, maybe their mom or dad was a lawyer. Maybe they came back because they wanted to represent the same community that they now serve. Like, they grew up in that same community. So it's really why you became a lawyer. Now, occasionally someone will say, well, I want to make a whole lot of money. Right? Like, they'll give you that kind of answer. It's like, okay, well, then you ask them the next question of, well, why should your clients choose you over your competition, right? If they have almost an unlimited amount of options, why should they choose you? And they'll say, well, we work the hardest, or we care the most. And then you'll say, well, why do you work the hardest, and why do you care the most, right? And then you can really start to dig into those different things. Some will say, look, we give every client our cell phone number, right? Not very scalable, but some will say that, right? Or they'll say, look, we form really strong relationships with our clients. We go above and beyond. Like, we become, we're very close with them and their families. We're very active in our community. We're passionate about these causes. And then it starts to come out because, I mean, these are all smart people. They could have chosen to spend their time in a different way. And I will say that if you can eliminate all the stress around cash flow and having to attract cases and having to manage people, and all that's left with is doing great work, you can find that people it's almost like they can exhale and say, well, wow, this is why I became a lawyer. I really wanted to help people, right? It's that impact that I'm able to make, and helping another person, that just having a fighter in their corner, right? Someone who can represent and serve somebody that may not be able to fight and stand on their own. But I also have shared that this is not like, your reasons are your reasons, right? It's you can want what you want, and why you stand out and differentiate. If across, there's what 1.3 million lawyers in America, roughly 300,000 or 400,000 law firms. I mean, I think it's less about how can I be unique from 1.3 million, and more about what am I passionate about, because that's going to be your message about how you differentiate. There's always, in every market, there's always like this super aggressive lawyer of like, we're just gonna curb stomp the competition, right? Like, we're gonna they have like some sort of weapon in their hand, and that's one approach, right? Then there's the complete opposite of that, of they're very nurturing. Then there's the other approach that's we're always available to you and we're responsive, right? So there's different value propositions. It just comes down to aligning with your personality and what is authentic to you.
Yeah, and it's amazing, isn't it, when you're dealing with a law firm or a business, and you help them through that process, and they get to that point where they realize what their identity is and who they are. I mean, it's that moment of clarity, and it's so liberating to them. And then if they can get behind that and live that through everything that they do throughout their business, weave that through the culture, it's amazing how transformative that can be. Shifting gears a little bit here, kind of big picture, and what's going on in the industry today. What do you see as three of the biggest pain points that lawyers are dealing with today?
So, first one, undoubtedly more competition. Like, it is more difficult to compete today than it was 10 years ago, and then certainly than it was 20 years ago. It's probably more difficult to compete this year than it is last year. And that's for a number of reasons. There's more and more lawyers in the market. Like, there's more aggressive advertisers. The cost of acquisition continues to rise. I mean, that's just, it's like, there's always things that are going to be true, right? Like death, taxes, and then, cost of acquisition, cost per lead, right? So those things are going to always exist. So it's, I think that's one challenge, but coupled with the fact that now you've got private equity coming in, and you're not just competing against other law firms, you're competing against these lead gen companies, right, that aren't really bound by any sort of jurisdiction. The guys incorporate in Arizona, and then they can essentially go and market as very transactional, buy leads, sell these leads back to other lawyers. So that pulls out a lot of cases that would normally go straight to lawyers in various markets, right? And that makes it more difficult to compete. And then the other thing is that the firms that are the most successful, typically a lot of the market leaders, they are able to invest the most in advertising. They're able to generate the most cases. They generate the most fees. They're able to reinvest that back into the firm, and it just creates this compounding effect where it becomes more difficult to compete against that because they just get more and more and more successful. And if you're a smaller firm and you're just starting out, it's like you don't have the resources. You can't compete dollar for dollar. It's like they've got systems now. Like now they're becoming much more like tech savvy, business savvy, and you're really competing against true professionals. So I think that's for sure one challenge.
And not to interrupt you, but how, big picture wise, how does a smaller firm overcome that?
So the first thing I would say is I would not compete with them on their turf, right? So for example, like I wouldn't compete with a massive TV advertiser on TV, right? And I wouldn't compete with the massive billboard advertiser with billboards because they're just going to outspend you. So the good news is, even still today, there's still a lot of opportunities to market in other ways, digital in particular. I mean, you can do an amazing job. You can get extreme competitive advantages. I know you guys do on the web, right? With their website, with SEO, with SEM, like pay-per-click, et cetera, on social media, on streaming. There's a lot of really great opportunities that you don't have to go, the traditional route. And you could do it that way. The other thing is that just the opportunity, especially on social, we're seeing a lot of really younger lawyers, small law firms that don't have a whole lot of resources starting to build a really strong social presence. They put out a ton of content. They come out with a lot of really valuable and engaging content. They start to really build a ton of engagement. And their cost of acquisition is like a fraction of what it would be if they were paying to acquire each of those different cases. Yeah. So that's one thing, and just in terms of just marketing more strategically, perhaps. The other thing is you have to build a practice, I think today especially, that is just much more efficient. And you have, a lot of the bloat that used to exist previously, because the cost of acquisition is higher and the margin is lower, you have to be much more efficient. So you've got to leverage technology. You've got to leverage, AI. You've got to find ways to do more with less. And then the other piece I'd say, and it's like some things never change, but doing the things that other people aren't willing to do. So this is honestly the complete opposite of what I just said, because you can spend marketing dollars and you can push out a marketing message, and that's easy to do when you have a ton of resources. But what about getting active in your community? And what about still doing one-on-ones and lunches with doctors and chiropractors and other lawyers? Like the things that whatever anybody else is not willing to do or to inconvenience them, I recommend you do that, because that would differentiate you. And it requires very little financial resources. It does require your time, but it's an opportunity to get very active in your community, to become, the hometown hero, and just put yourself out there. So I would if I'm seeing someone in the market that's obviously a market leader that's doing great, I wouldn't compete with them dollar for dollar. I wouldn't compete with them on their turf. You'd have to go in a different direction, very different value proposition, position yourself differently, market yourself differently, run the practice as efficiently as possible, because really what you're going after is, how do I get a lower cost of acquisition, as a whole, right? Because you can't compete with what they're spending.
Yeah, it is. That's a wealth of knowledge, and our listeners can obviously tell you've been in the trenches for a while with law firms. I'm interested, Michael, as we wrap up here, any final thoughts or key summaries that you would want to share with our listeners?
Well, the thing I'll say is that I don't want to end up doom and gloom. But Matt, I was thinking about your question. The other thing I would say is, when we talk about AI and artificial intelligence, this is a skill and a capability that I believe is that every single firm owner and their team needs to learn and start adapting into their daily workflow. And if they fail to do this, I truly, truly, truly believe that they will no longer be able to remain relevant or competitive. It's no different than I think in the early 2000s, ignoring like, using like a computer, right? Like you didn't have to do it, but you were eventually over time put at a competitive disadvantage, or deciding in the late 90s that, you weren't going to use the internet. This is here. It's here now. Using AI tools goes well beyond just drafting emails and, basic prompts. I mean, there's so many opportunities to just increase your own output and efficiency. And I don't see AI wiping us out. I see the competition really, it's like your competitor that leverages AI, they're going to be the problem for you. So the good news is that we often find that for like, it's the smaller firms and the more like, let's say, entrepreneurial firms that pick up these things much faster. And that's what starts to give them an edge. So I would get on top of that now. And then the other piece is just that don't do it alone. Right? It's like one of my regrets, especially early on with the business, is that the most painful and slow way to learn something is through experience. Right? To have to like make a mistake and then learn from the mistake, then try something different. So there's all sorts of different like just law firm conferences, communities, like things that you can learn from other lawyers who've already been to where you're trying to go. That can give you a lot of great insights, and they'll share, and they're collaborative. That can save you a lot of pain and suffering. Because every lawyer I come across, they're a hard worker. They're dedicated, they're committed. It's like we all work hard, right? Like I've yet to come across someone that's just lazy, right? It's like table stakes that they're going to work hard, and they're all smart. It's just knowing like the path that lies ahead of you. It's coming back to that, that earlier question, and not doing it alone. Like just it's this can be very, very painful and very stressful if you're just trying to carry the weight of your shoulders, no matter where your firm is at. Whether I've seen it with solo firm owners, and I've seen it with firms with 300 people, and then even at 300 people, they sometimes feel alone because they feel like they're carrying every problem themselves, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. I think there's a lot of great resources and communities out there for you.
No doubt. I believe somebody needed to hear that, and we're better together. There's no doubt about it. Lean in on others' experiences. You'll save yourself a lot of time and money in that process. Michael, what's the best way for listeners to find you?
Yeah, so I'm on the internet, right? So on all the social platforms, just my last name, Mogill, Instagram, etc. Mogill. And I've got a website, michaelmogill.com. Our company's crisp.co. And if I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, I know you mentioned the podcast, but we also have a great podcast that I'd love for you guys to come on, if you'll indulge me. And our podcast, the Game Changing Attorney Podcast, the website is legalpodcast.com. And then the final piece is, if anyone's interested, we wrote a great book that you also featured in. Right? It's funny, man. I'm thinking back all the callbacks of all the support early on, but it's on Amazon. It's called The Game Changing Attorney. It's a great book if you are looking to build a brand, figure out your messaging, positioning, and get started there.
Thanks again, Michael. Appreciate you sharing with our listeners, folks. That wraps up another action-packed episode. To listen to other thought leaders in the industry, share their experiences and advice, much like Michael has, subscribe to the LAWsome podcast. We have a ton of great topics on the horizon this year, so stay tuned, stay LAWsome.